Hey everybody, welcome back to the Graphically Hip channel. My name is Sarah, and I thought I would do a tutorial for you guys on how to use the Quick Trace tool. Many of you are purchasing images on Etsy for your designs, and while that's cool and you want to make sure that your seller has the rights to those images, as mentioned in my previous video about copyrights, once you're sure you do have the rights to whatever it is you're working with, they're probably selling you a PNG, which doesn't really work well for us people who need to be working mostly in vector. So I'm going to show you a couple different tricks that you can do to vectorize your PNGs. So within Illustrator, you have a button up here called Image Trace. That's what we're going to be working with today. So I've gathered a few images that I took off of Google, and just as a caveat, I would never use these images on anything that I'm selling because these are not free for the taking and I do not have the rights for them. These images are strictly just to show you how to do the thing that you're asking to do. So I'm going to start with this flower shape. And Illustrator does really well with like bold lines and simple shapes. Up until recently, it didn't do well with more complex images, but you'll see now that it actually does a pretty good job. So if we zoom in I just hit the Z button, but you can also hit the magnifying glass. You can see how pixelated this is and how low resolution it is. Just out of practice and out of habit, I guess, I always just minimize the image. And yes, it's still pixelated, but it's not as obvious when it's its true shape, like when it's its actual size, I should say. So anyway, there's our image. We're just going to go ahead and click image trace and it's done. Literally it took a second. Now look at those nice crisp vector lines. Once that's traced though, now you just have this box. I'm going to put it out on the gray area so you can see it better. And you can't edit it or do much with it. So what you have to do next is hit expand. Then you still have this kind of grouped box. So there's two ways you can ungroup things. You're going to right click and say ungroup. Or on a Mac, it's Shift Command G. On a PC, it's Shift Control G. So while I'm here, I'm just going to hit ungroup, click outside the box, and it's still grouped. There we go. Now we can just start taking the pieces off. And there we're left with our shape that we wanted. Now we can color this any color that we want. And we can add cut lines to it and all the fun things. So that's how you do it with a simple shape. Now, if you notice, this is a very low resolution image of, I actually forget who that actor is right now, but you can just see it's a very low res. There's no crispness to it. Very blurry and pixely. So if I'm selecting my image and I just say image trace, that's what happens, which is actually kind of a cool effect if that's the kind of look you're going for. But in this case, it's not. So let's switch it to something like, there's options in here, right? And you play around with these and see what you like. Let's try a sketched art. Yeah, more or less the same. 3 colors. So as you can see, you'll just get different results based on which one you pick, or no results at all based on which one you pick. And sometimes the image is just not high enough resolution to do anything with it. So pull that off to the side and grab this real nice, crisp, high resolution photo of a hamburger or a cheeseburger, I guess. When you zoom in, yeah, there are still pixels, but for the most part, this is a pretty good quality photo for what we're going to do today. So again, if I just hit image trace, I'm getting that weird black and white shape because that's the default. But Um, if we hit high fidelity photo or low fidelity photo, I think high fidelity photo tends to work better. You can, so I hit low fidelity photo, and you can see like it did a pretty good job, but the transitions between colors is not as smooth as it could be. And I mean, for what we're doing, that may not matter, right? If you're putting this on a t-shirt or turning it into a sticker or something like that, it may not really matter how realistic it looks, depending on your desired result. So, but I prefer the high fidelity one. It does such a good job. Just wait till you see this result. And sometimes if your computer is slower, that might take longer. My computer's pretty fast, so it just took seconds, but it can take much longer. Look at the result of this. Like if you were that far away, you would never know that that was a vector drawing now. But like as we zoom in, you can see all the different vector shapes that it created. So, again, we have to hit, and maybe I'll put this off in the gray area, make it a little smaller so it fits. Okay, and so again, we have to hit the expand and then ungroup. Sometimes you have to hit ungroup again. Now that leaves me with a pretty undesirable shadow down here, so I'm going to get rid of that. Maybe I'll even show you a little trick on how you can make your own shadow or your own, I guess that's not a shadow, that's a reflection. I'm just going to get rid of all this because it's ugly. Actually, I'll leave it for now. And then you can still see like little bits of the background, that white background. So I would just go in and delete those so they aren't super obvious, unless you're putting this on a white shirt, in which case it wouldn't matter. Okay, so now we have this shape, and I'm going to put a link at the end of this video to another video on how to then put a cut line on this shape. It's a whole different process. So instead of going into that here, you can watch the next video, and it'll just show up on your screen at the end of this video. And then I promised I would show you how to make this into a reflection. So I'm going to grab, and by the way, if you hit Command Y or Control Y, if you're on a PC, you can see all the little shapes that it made in vector. And that actually takes your computer a lot of memory to work with. So, you know, you can grab your shapes and move them around and stuff, and look at, there's a lot of shapes in there. Whereas in this one, you just have the one shape with these little lines in the middle. So, with our hamburger, I'm just going to grab it and group it, which is Control G or Command G, or right click, and it would say group here had I not already hit the keyboard shortcut. So this is now grouped. Now I'm just going to drag it down. Actually, I'm going to go back a step. I'm going to hit Command C, which is copy, or Control C if you're on a PC. And then Command F, F as in Frank. And what that does is it takes a copy of that hamburger and pastes it exactly in place. It's called paste in place. Okay, so now if I drag that copy off, you will see that we have two hamburgers. And this is, like I said, a lot of memory for the computer to work with, so it's a little bit slower. So now we have 1 and 2. I'm just going to put that back where it was. And then all I'm going to do is drag that hamburger down to about there and move it back up, holding the shift button so that it stays perfectly in line with this one. And actually, I might drag that out a little bit more. Okay. So now we have kind of a perfect reflection, but you can see it's like it's too vivid or bright for a reflection. So I'm going to do this two different ways for you. I'm going to first go up to the opacity bar, and you can find this also under window. and just change that, bring the opacity down. Opaque means solid and not see-through. So the less opacity you have, the more see-through the object is. So now you can see we have a reflection. The other way to do this is, do I have it out here? Yes, I do. Under Window, you'll find a tool called Transparency. Okay, my tool is already in my sidebar, so I'm going to use it over here. I do have a cold today, so I apologize. My voice sounds a little bit different. So I'm going to double click this to create and edit an opacity mask. So there's my image that I'm creating an opacity mask on. So I'm double clicking it, and yes, now my image has disappeared. Okay, and that's okay. If I hit Command Y, it's still there. It's just I've made an opacity mask. Next, I'm going to grab a square, my box tool, and I'm just going to draw a box that's roughly the same size as the shape that I have. And once you start drawing it, your object will show up. Okay, so now I have my box there, and it's put essentially what we just did, which is put an opacity mask on this, but we're going to get tricky with it. I'm going to click over to my gradient button, and you can also find that tool under Window. So the gradient button has a bunch of different options in here. So gradient just means that you're fading one color into another, or you're fading one color into nothing. So in this case, I want to put a black to white gradient on it, on the box that we just created. Okay. So once I click in my bar, you can see how my image is bright over here and almost transparent on the end. Okay. But what I want to do is have it bright up here and transparent down here. So all I have to do is change the angle of my gradient to 90 degrees. Okay, so that did change the angle for me. But now I want to switch it, right? Because I want it to be brighter up here than it is down here. So I'm just going to click this button here, which will switch the direction. Okay. So now I'm losing my image down at the bottom, which is what we want, but I want it even more. So I'm going to take my white slider, and you feel free to play with this, right? Like this is so much fun to play with and learn. So I'm going to take my white slider and drag it over. And you can see how that highlights more of this. Okay. Now I'm going to take my black slider and drag it over. And you can see how that takes away some of this. Now, because I don't want my reflection to be as bright as the original image, I'm going to click on my white slider again, which is this half, the top half of this square. And I'm just going to change its opacity right in here, so it's a little bit more reflection-like. Okay, so now we have our reflection and it fades away to nothing, which is exactly what we want. Now, when you go to select anything from now on, you won't be able to, except for that opacity mask, because that's what you currently have selected in your transparency tool. See that blue highlighted box? That means your opacity mask is selected. So I literally cannot pick, like I'm clicking. I can't click anything but that. So you're just going to go back into your transparency tool, click that box, and now you're done with your transparency tool. You can grab all your things. You can move them around. You can group them together. Look how nice that looks. Now, adding a cut line to this is going to be extra tricky when you have a reflection like that. So that's a very advanced skill. And in this case, wouldn't work very well at all unless this was going onto a white shirt. Um, in that case, you could add your cut line just around the edge, like, quarter inch away from the edge of your shape, all the way around it. But if you were putting this on a white shirt and you did that, then your white vinyl would show up. Or sorry, if you were putting this on a black shirt, your white vinyl would show up if you were to do it that way. So um, that's how you use the image trace tool. Have fun with it, play around with it. And if you liked our video today, please check out our other ones and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for listening.